Let's talk about fires in Monrovia.
All right. Trying to think of notable fires. The first one that comes to mind was in the 1890s when water was rationed. There was a drought in effect. At that point, the city's only source of water was the water coming from Monrovia and Sawpit Canyons. So the water was running in the water mains only a certain point during the day. My grandmother said if you were anticipating either doing a laundry or taking a bath, you drew the water during the time that water was available in anticipation of either taking your bath or doing your laundry later on in the day when it would not be available. That's when George and Annetta Monroe's house on West Lime caught fire and burned to the ground because there was no water to fight the fire. That would have been about 1894, 1895.
Do we know how it caught fire?
No, but it was before electricity, so it might have been from a wood-burning stove or maybe an upset kerosene lamp. I'm thinking of a second incident, probably from 1887. It took place at the First Baptist Church. Someone upset a kerosene lamp. The bowl broke. Kerosene spread over the surface of whatever that lamp was on and caught fire. And someone who was there attending a service or the event had presence of mind enough to take the covering that was normally on the pump organ and throw it over the fire, and so it suffocated the flames that way, kept the fire from spreading. Any other fires? This was not in Monrovia, but nearby in Duarte. There was an early Duarte family, the Sandefers, and I'd noticed at Live Oak Cemetery there's a grave for Letty Sandifer, who died in, I want to say 1891, at the age of maybe 17 or 18, and I noted the fact that she died quite young. Then I happened to be at the Duarte Museum going through, I don't know if it was at the museum yet or not. Anyway, I had occasion to look at my great Aunt Margaret's scrapbook. And she had cut out a newspaper clipping from the local newspaper that explained that Letty Sandiford had died when a lamp that she was using to read by exploded, and she died from a burn sustained when the lamp exploded. Now, I'm assuming she was burning something other than kerosene, because as far as I know, kerosene does not explode. But something maybe more refined, higher in octane, might, and that's what happened to her. So hanging in the Duarte Museum is a very nice pencil drawing of Letty that was executed by Mrs. James A. Fauché, the local wife of the local school superintendent principal of Letty, that was probably done for her family as a memorial after she died. That would have been 1891. Next fires. They existed. I'm not exactly a fire, but the Scotia Hotel fire of 1908 was notable because it happened when there was still a volunteer fire department. The hotel in the Scotia Hotel, kitchen in the Scotia Hotel had a fire that began in the kitchen, probably from a wood-burning kitchen range. The call went out to the volunteer fire department, and they had been attending a social event and were dressed in tuxes with tails. So they received the call, they went to John Baxter's barn, they got ready to go on location to fight the fire and realized that they could not find the wrench that enabled them to open the fire hydrant to get the water they needed to fight the fire. Either one of their member was a blacksmith or there was a blacksmith handy. Anyway, they set him to work forging another hydrant wrench. And while he was starting with that, somebody looked under a pile of harness in the corner of John Baxter's barn, found the hydrant wrench, so they were then equipped to go down to the Scotia Hotel and deal with a fire. And John Wiley's description was the fire, being very accommodating, was a slow burning fire. And when it saw the phalanx of parlor sheiks advancing, it died of laughter and saved the firemen a lot of messy work. The problem was John Crandall, or Jack Crandall, was the chief of the volunteer fire department. He was so mortified by their ineptitude and the lack of support and funding that he tendered a letter of resignation. And again, as John Wiley said, the tone of the letter was hot enough to scorch the varnish on the councilmanic table, and they finally did something. This was 1908. Took a while. I think by 1910, the first piece of firefighting equipment, as such, it had a hose cart before and a chemical cart, arrived. It was a converted tourister automobile, and the city used that until 1917. Another big fire, the Grandview or La Vista Grande Hotel, caught fire in 1916.
Where was that?
Where City Hall sits today. Fire began, I think the estimate was around midnight. Fire department was called out, realized that they were wholly, completely unequipped to deal with a fire of that magnitude, and so all they could really do was to use the fire truck to hose down the adjacent buildings so they didn't catch fire from the heat. Burned to the ground.
And was this a large building?
The large two-story wood frame building, tinder dry, a perfect fire trap. Harold Frolub was a youngster at the time. His father had Frolub's grocery store on Myrtle Avenue, and they were renting, either they were renting or had rented a room from the Andersons. And he wrote a letter that you discovered in the Historical Society archives describing the hotel fire. He said they stood on the corner and watched it burn until it became too hot to stand there, so they retreated to the Anderson house, where Mrs. Anderson treated them to home-baked cookies. He also said the heat of the fire was so intense that it heated the bricks of the chimneys red hot, and you could see them glowing in the midst of the fire. Everything, all the debris fell through into the basement of the hotel, including a large floor safe. They never retrieved the floor safe, they just covered everything over. Didn't do anything about the chimneys for a couple of years. I have a picture of my dad when he was probably about, I'm guessing maybe 6, and that would have been maybe 1920, 21 or 22. And off in the distance, you could still see those sentinel chimneys from the hotel fire. My grandmother said finally, apparently the mortar deteriorated to the point where they were considered a hazard, so they pushed them over. When they were excavating for the current City Hall basement in 1954, the bulldozer found the old floor safe that had fallen through in 1916, brought it up to the surface. Quite a crowd gathered. Everybody was imagining what might be inside that safe. So they got a crowbar, pried the safe door open. A little rainwater that had seeped inside over the years, nothing else. If there'd been anything in there, it would have disintegrated over time.
Did your grandparents ever talk about this fire? Because they lived catty corner from the
not so
hotel.
much my grandparents, but my dad said one of his earliest memories, he and his brother were sleeping in the north bedroom of my house. He said his parents came in the middle of the night, awakened him, and picked him up out of bed, carried him to the north bedroom window so that he could watch the fire from across the street and watch the hotel burn down. Never asked my uncle what his memories were of the fire, but my dad didn't remember the fire.
Did you say how old your dad was then?
He would have been 4.
Mm.
Yeah, he said maybe it wasn't his first memory, but it was among his first memories was the hotel fire.
Mm.
Other fires,
And so, what happened as a result of that fire? Did they do anything to
oh yes,
improve the equipment?
finally realized, we're going to have to do something to upgrade our firefighting equipment. So that's when the Seagrave was purchased in 1917.
The Seagrove fire engine.
Our engine that served for many years, it was replaced. Served as a backup, then was phased out of service completely. Ended up at Jerez Resort, and then finally came back to Monrovia, and it's part of an ongoing restoration.